I'm Sean Lewis, OD, class of 2023, president of the LGBTQIA plus organization here at Salus University, and he, him, his. Fun fact, I was president of a LGBTQIA plus group 20 years ago in high school. Big misunderstanding is that a lot of times the being nice and being good are conflated sometimes, where allies may be tempted to keep the peace instead of challenge people. So just because it's peaceful or quiet doesn't mean damage isn't being done. And just avoiding conversations doesn't mean that it's a more just world. To be really helpful, aside from interrupting overt damages done to the community or overt homophobia, transphobia, uh, bi erasure, things of that nature, would be to be more proactive and just to challenge people and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I see that you support this city council person. Are you aware that the city council person is advocating for an end to gay marriage? Or just to actually challenge people on how their beliefs align with the actions that come from those beliefs. So if someone believes that, hey, a candidate that I want to win should win, and somebody in the LGBTQIA plus community says, well, that candidate wants to actively limit my rights. And to be an ally, you can't just shrug your shoulders and say, hey, well, I want this person because of taxes, or I like this person's fiscal plan for the next 20 years, when our community doesn't have the luxury of thinking about just the economy or just taxes or those things. We have to think about basic things that other people don't have to stress about. No one has to stress about, oh, if there's a picture of me and my spouse of an opposite of a different gender, then I'm not going to be fired for it. Where we just got a lot of protections just this year, just in 2020, like not 100 years ago, not 200 years ago, not 50 years ago, not 20 years ago, this year. And to just make that clear to people that those things are still on the chopping block in each election cycle, that we're still under threat of losing our rights, because we've lost our rights before. In 2008 in California, voters took away actually married gay people's and same-sex, same-gender couples' marriage rights, like after they had gotten them. So it's not a matter of these things are safe and banked. It's a Supreme Court nominee or a Supreme Court case or a federal ruling or just a flick of a pen of an administration can send us hurtling back generations. Salus can be better as an ally to our community is similar to how it can be better as a community, better as an ally to in the fight for Black lives, where it just has to be a matter of people can't be able to opt out of advocacy. It can't be optional to want to learn more. These things have to be integrated. If there were actual board exam questions for these licensures, where people had to know what is homophobia, what is systemic racism, what is the history of discrimination for these groups. If these things were board's questions, just as much as board's questions might be about the interleukin 12 or the very, very, very specific arcane knowledge that every optometrist was told that you have to know this to be able to practice well. Those kinds of things that make it just an automatic part of the culture and the framework is probably the best, strongest advocacy. And part of that is also asking the question of what systems are in place to stop people that are against the LGBTQIA plus community or any other marginalized groups like Black people. What stops racists? What stops transphobic people? What stops homophobic people from becoming students or becoming doctors or becoming faculty or becoming administrators? If there aren't any conscious systems to block people like that and those ideologies from becoming part of the community, then we have to assume that those people with those ideologies are here and are matriculating through or working with or the community still. If there were people at the school who didn't believe that we should be fighting glaucoma, if there are people in the school that didn't believe that people with disabilities should have certain protections, then it would come to be the same kinds of problems. Whereas a lot of these ideologies are adverse to the idea of wanting better healthcare for people. And if you really want the best healthcare outcomes for these different marginalized groups, then it should go to show that you have these ideologies that say that, hey, I recognize that these problems exist. We're not told how we feel about narrow angle glaucoma. We're not told how we feel about cancer or asked, do you believe in hypertension? Do you believe in um, uh, rehabilitative care or low vision therapy? We're not asked that. But since our community gets so politicized, like our very lives get politicized, it comes to, oh, we don't want to talk about your community or its health needs because that might offend some people who don't like you. And we have to look at that in the same way as, okay, how would that sound if someone was against women? If someone said, okay, I don't believe that women should be in these working jobs, we wouldn't allow that, and we shouldn't. We wouldn't allow that kind of ideology. But even still now, years and years after Lawrence v. Texas, uh, which decriminalized homosexuality in the United States and the remaining states that had it, just back in 2003, not in 1900 anything, just 2003, where people were just, where it was homosexuality was decriminalized. Police could no longer break into the homes of people that are in same gender relationships and drag them off to jail. And that's that stigma of saying, we don't want to tackle it head on, or we don't want to get too political, can't stand. How our community spans across so many differences, and it is a unifying aspect to be able to meet and understand a common issue with people across uh, affinity groups of gender, race, religion, nationality, uh, like ethnic background, heritage, and even sometimes political ideologies, where there's no choice aspect to it. So it's just you're in the community or you're not. You're in the community or an out. It's something that is just innate within you. You didn't sign up to be a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, asexual, pansexual. You didn't intersex. You can't just opt into that. It's just something innate that you discover about yourself. And more people that discover about that, it just unites a lot of people. So there's a lot of room to really communicate and share ideas and experiences, because my experience as a Black cisgender bisexual male is very different than a someone from India who might be a transgender, and a lot of these different issues that come to the table, and we're able to learn from each other and learn how to fight issues differently and support each other. There's someone I've looked up to for a long time. I've mentioned it in another article. One of my historical fraternity brothers in Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated is Bayard Rustin. Just more so, he's within an affinity group of mine, cisgender, Black male, LGBTQ community with within a notoriously, I guess, a society that always requires you to keep coming out, or just doesn't allow you to like be within yourself. Or he just was arrested for one thing or another. And that intersectionality piece is just really something that resonates with me, and the work that he did and being vocal about it and unapologetic about it, and saying that, hey, I'm going to fight these battles for Black lives. I'm going to fight these battles for the LGBTQIA plus community, and not have any apologies about it, because he knew uh, the impacts of that on my generation and the generations to come afterward would be so important. Just knowing that the youth are still dealing with the fact that they have to first understand themselves. And a lot of times they're isolated within structures that aren't amicable to them actually being themselves and coming out. Some people are very fortunate to have families that are supportive or have ideologies that are fine with saying that, hey, like my child is realizing this about themselves and they're going to come to terms with this. But there are a huge number of youth who don't have that security, or even if they don't know, they might not know they have that security at home and are rightfully afraid to actually communicate that. And so with that comes challenges, especially for the ones that identify as men or trans women who are at risk of a lot of either exploitation or bullying, as well as instances of sexually transmitted diseases, if they're not able to grow within themselves and have the best structures available for them, particularly towards protecting themselves or education about what does sex mean for that community. And a lot of their family structures are just geared to just telling them, you're going to get married to this heterosexual in this heterosexual uh, ideology, and that's all they have. They don't have any space to be themselves, so they're always in a rock and a hard between a rock and a hard place. There's a side that's where it's okay to be out and proud. Some people just for their ideology, just for just how their demeanor works. Like I'm not running. I don't have a neon sign above my head. However, I have cisgender privilege. I still get recognized for the gender that I associate with, and but the tail end of that, which is a minor by comparison obstacle, is that I have to come out more times than usual. If I go to a new space, there's not an automatic, oh, this person is within the community. It's like, no, this is a brand new community, a brand new group where I have to go through saying, okay, is it safe for me to tell them like how I am? Unless I just wear a rainbow up front. And even still, even then, I've seen this before, I can be president of the LGBTQIA plus organization here at Salus, and I'll still have people, they'll say like, oh, I never knew. And there's that weird um, unintentional backhanded compliment where they see that passing as heterosexual is is something that we strive to do, and it's not. It's just I'm not acting in any way. I'm not trying to pass in any way. It's just this is just how my life is and how I am naturally. And I think to tell the youth, it's good for them to find, I think, online support groups that are actually like professional support groups. Smile, the Sexual Minority Youth Assistance League, um, things like that that are geared towards their age range, so they're not just out in the wind or seeing anybody that might exploit them or take advantage of them. And it's important that they get connected to those resources, because a lot of times they don't have, if I'm a gay person or a bisexual or transgender person in Nebraska somewhere, or Idaho or Florida or Georgia or Texas, I might not have the resources that someone in DC or New York or California might have. And those kinds of just people to talk to, so that they can get a framework of that you are okay, this is a natural variation of humanity, and people that are saying otherwise, they don't have the science to back them up, and that they have the support available to them. And we just have to make sure that they have those supports available. And as doctors and healthcare specialists, healthcare workers, what we can do is make sure in our practices, if even if it's a pamphlet, even if it's a sign somewhere that it's a safe space, even if it's a pamphlet that just has listings of these are organizations that are for you, just somewhere within offices, somewhere within arm's reach, so that they can actually have some materials to find some ways to be safe. There's a lot of growth that's happening. I think there's a huge plateau that's hit where there's buy-in for the people that want to see it happen. And once hitting that plateau of like raising more awareness, maybe a day or two here, you have more people putting pronouns to help people that are transgender feel more comfortable, or even just to help train professionals here that, hey, just showing your own pronouns, even if even if the person might see zero trans people throughout their entire careers, just the word out to normalize just having to say that, hey, just because you might not know anyone yourself that is trans, just having that kind of support is helps educate. But what the school could be doing more of is, as I was saying before, is just making more things as just woven in as mandatory. There are classes in diversity where that are great, that are definitely what should be happening, but those things a lot of times get isolated to that credit, and then the students are no longer held responsible or accountable to how they see certain issues. They don't have to grapple with it outside of that coursework. And having more times where students are challenged about it, would be a lot more useful, I'd say, than even if it's woven in tandem with some of the more obscure things we learn about, would be dramatically helpful, because it would be one more thing that students will put into their heads because they have to. If you didn't know about the epidemic of trans women being murdered, this is one of the deadliest years for trans women in the nation's history. And if they know more about it just as part of their education throughout classes, sprinkled here or there, or just adamantly put in, is just that, hey, we need to help this community, then we can say that, okay, Salus is doing a lot. I don't think we can ever really say enough. I think that's a trap for us to fall into as a school, if we say we're doing enough, and to always assume that we're not doing enough. And that would be the best way to say that, hey, we want to make it so that we are recognized as the pinnacle. We're not waiting on other schools. We're not waiting on other universities to take the lead on it, because we want to be the number one health science university in the world. So that doesn't come from falling behind what other people are doing necessarily. It comes from different fronts. We can lead on certain things to push ahead. As patients, there a lot of discrimination, particularly people that are trans, as far as healthcare coverage, or even doctors themselves just not wanting to deal with patients that are trans, or if they could, they a lot of times they can't help dealing with LGBTQ people that are not trans. But when they come across certain things, they say that it's still in vogue to discriminate against trans people, more so than it is still it is still a thing for people to discriminate against the rest of the community, but they are at the forefront of the damage at this time, even though they were at the forefront of securing all the rights for the LGBTQIA plus organizations and community. They were at the forefront of those fights, but now they're still the ones taking the most damage, as far as, okay, we're not going to cover you. Okay, we're not going to recognize your needs here. We're going to continue to have on our forms sex, male or female, and not have anything better such as XX or XY or XXY, things that would just make people feel more comfortable around that. As far as even asking, like, are you nursing or pregnant? Even though it might seem awkward for my ears to hear and say, even as a member of the community, and I'm from the 80s, and so for me to tell someone who's presenting and looks to me to be a cis male, for me to say, is there any chance that you're nursing or pregnant? That is that is showing awareness that there are trans men and people that are going to sit in my chair in my office in 2041, that I won't be able to tell, was this person born male or female? And for me to give that as just part of my practice, even though it's going to sound awkward to the first 10, 15, 20 years of cis men that hear it, that hey, this is a reality, that hey, I'm not going to I'm not going to specialize and try to piece through. I don't have to. As a healthcare professional, I can ask these questions the same way that a trans person might feel uncomfortable if I'm asking if you were what what was their gender assigned at birth for different things that I would need as a doctor. I'm just going to ask the same questions to all my patients. XY chromosomes have nothing to do with gender. Gender is a man-made, human-made construct. The animal kingdom doesn't worry about who's wearing what types of fabric or who's putting on lipstick or anything. And we're all chordates. We're all within the animal kingdom. So just the aspect of what were your chromosomes at birth? What was your assigned sex at birth? And those things are the only things that we would need as far as making determinations. We don't need to call them by the gender pronoun that we think they are. We don't have to, it's not our job to enforce gender roles on our patients. Right? That doesn't help anyone, and it's something that we have to work as a community to eliminate, because it's not on us to force trans people to live by what we say. And using gender neutral pronouns, the gender neutral third person, they are very easy. It's easier than people think. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and brought up to say sir, ma'am, like all those things. But I've gotten, even though I had decades of practice with that, it wasn't that hard to break out of those and to be more respectful. When I was teaching, I broke out of saying ladies and gentlemen, or saying distinguished guests instead, or ladies, gentlemen, and gender non-binary, ladies, gentlemen, and gender non-binary students, just be more actively more inclusive, to just make sure students know that it's on my mind. It's on my mind to respect them, and it doesn't take anything away from me to offer more respect in those areas. The main one that we were tracking before was, if you go to a certain state, can you be fired for them finding out that you had a LGBTQIA plus post in the past, or you went on a date with someone that they didn't think you should go on a date with? That was the reality up until 2020. And so that, before that Supreme Court case, that was the huge issue to worry about. We had a map that we look to and say that, okay, if you're a healthcare professional, these are the places that you shouldn't go to, because you could move out there. They could fire you on day one because they found out that you went on a date and it wasn't with who they wanted you to go on a date with. Or if you're married, you have to keep your marriage a secret. You can't tell them who you're married to, because they can fire you for it. That's what we lived with in 2020. And there are still places that are fighting against those employment non-discrimination policies that are coming down from that Supreme Court decision. With another Supreme Court decision next year, all of that can be washed away. Like, it's still, the ink is not dry on a lot of these rights that were denied to us. It's not like we won rights. It's rights were denied of us. Like, there were protections that were afforded to Billy and Susan could show their marriage off at the company picnic all they wanted. Assuming Billy and Susan are a cisgender heterosexual couple. But Sam and David could not. And it was only based on the gender and sex of one of the people in the couple. And that didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense, but people are still fighting to try to overturn that, so that people, out of what they call religious liberty, will be able to discriminate. And my question is, if people that don't eat pork as part of their religious practices, they are able to practice their faith without banning pork for everyone else. They can practice their faith and they can be CEOs without firing everyone else that eats pork. So we just ask that the mainly evangelical, conservative, Christian coalitions that are trying to use religious liberty against us to take that into account, that other religions are practicing their faith without imposing their religious laws on others just fine. There are times still coming up where I'm a former educator, and I see some of my students on social media now who I knew them in 10th grade, but now I'm seeing them, like, even though at the time they didn't know anything about my sexuality or anything like that, but I would still make sure I would correct people on like terms they're using. I would make sure that my classrooms were always a safe space. And to see them now, not just by a function of my actions, but by their own growth, they are adamantly and going out and just they're making posts, they're doing advocacy, they're talking with people in their communities, they're talking to their city councils to make things more inclusive for a community that they're not even in. So it's a community that they learned about. They're not, so a lot of them aren't in that community, but they took it upon themselves to say, this is important to me that that community is not treated badly. Even though I can sit in safety and privilege and not speak out for them, they lean into risk. They lean into social pressure to be ostracized themselves or even called derogatory things themselves, because it's so important for them, for a community that they're not in, to have a better life. And and when I see that, I don't think there's anything as far as I see that, and it makes me very, very proud of the work that the community's done, and the way that um, we're fighting the tide of. There's always been a conservative force against us, and this is regardless of political affiliation, because there were Democrats and Republicans adamantly against our community, and whoever the most conservative factions are historically have been the antagonists to every minority rights struggle in American history. I'm struggling to find even one counter example, but that fight continues, and just to see the youth take up that mantle is very inspiring to me. I want to see it just get really boring. I want to see the LGBTQIA plus community just have okay, remember when we had to fight for things days. Remember when we had a lot. Remember when we had these months and we had these days and everything. And we'll still have them, but I want there to be so much progress that there are no articles that say, "Oh, look, there's going to be a gay Marvel character now." Where why weren't we represented before? Like, why is there always a limit or all these constraints and politics around it, when for all of our lives we've been inundated with heterosexual imagery at every turn? So that was never politicized. Every Disney movie, every song, every commercial, every TV show, Netflix special, no one ever noticed how much saturation there was of heterosexuality and cisgender narratives, and even gender binary narratives within the LGBTQIA plus community. There aren't enough gender non-binary, asexual, pansexual, and intersex conversations going on, or representation. And for us to get to a time where it's just not a thing, and a black gay person or a black bisexual person or black trans person can go to a ballot box and say, which one of these is best for the economy for me, instead of first saying which one of these is going to help me live to see the next 10 years, which one of these is going to make it so that I can have access to basic human rights. And so that will be the litmus test of how much progress is being done, if we have to worry about those things that other people just don't have to worry about. Shout out to Sagas and the group. It's really really a great thing to see at the school now. I know when I came here as a student, just to see that level of support just already here. Like it's, I know at the schools I was at before, at Norfolk State, there was a Legacy, and when I was in, when I was that president of that group in high school, in it was, I think it was 2001, 2000 ish, and the PTA got it shut down. This was a public school, public school. I was the founder of it, and an English teacher like tapped me on the shoulder because I had just like come out in high school, and people were flabbergasted or anything. I mean, I didn't change anything of how I was, but I just wasn't intimidated by, because I had cis privilege. I didn't go through what the lesbians and transgender people on campus did. I had a bit more privilege to be free in who I was. And so even when they shut that down, because the mostly conservative Baptist PTA didn't want it to exist, we still met. We still had, we made little rainbow necklaces out of dollar store beads, and we just kept fighting through. And to see how much has changed since then, and how there's, even though the road is not done, there's been so much progress for high school youth, at least, to have security and support and safety from those types of PTAs and from those conservative like factions within their parenting and educators. A lot of times there were educators that were definitely adamantly against our existence too. And just to have that be changes that happen, that's my historical like point there. And just to see so many things that changed, and the fight for Prop 8, that was huge for me. I made videos on YouTube when I was yeah, it was really, it was just really, really rough. And to know so many people just so easily just said, oh yeah, we're just going to vote not for you, just not to be able to get married anymore. And that was the thing. Like that was, and the people that thought that are still around now. And there are still a lot of people that still think like that. They're quiet. They might be quiet about it, but a lot of them still end up in places of power and influence, and they can silently work against us and just say that we're just doing this out of religious liberty, and we're just trying to protect people's ability to practice their faith. And I see right through it. And it is important for allies to call them out every time and be adamant about it. No, pop, pop. No, I'd say like anybody that just wants more information, I'm an open book. I'm a warrior for like trying to be for like these rights as best I can. There's so much more I could have done, but I try to do what's possible. But if I can offer any kind of information or support and everything, and help people learn how to be better at it, I do. I am adamant that I have an invisible professional degree in certain uh, aspects of LGBTQIA plus and intersectional and Black history, like ideology. I'll never be able to put letters behind my name for it, but I do have a vast amount of information and support on those things. And I would love to be a resource to help people expand the fight and help them in their understanding of the issues. And we'll just go from there.